Like they've got it. It's just colouring's a bit off. But that's it. Legible. Yeah. All right. Are we all? Yeah. Let's start.
Yeah, fine.
Good afternoon, everyone. I apologise for the slightly late start, but I think we're sorted with the IT now. Fingers crossed. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the Somerset North Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Cathy Pitts, Chair of the committee, and to my right is Councillor Matt Martin, Vice Chair. We'll first start off with the housekeeping. If we hear the alarm go off, we're not expecting a drill, it's the real thing. So please head out to the double doors that you came in through, out through reception, and we'll gather in King Square. The toilets are in reception, should you need them. And I normally say at this point there's water available, but there isn't any today, I'm sorry. So this meeting is a hybrid meeting, and that means that committee members are present in Bridgewater House, and the meeting is also available online via Teams. Please note that the meeting is being recorded. Can I remind all of those in the room to turn your mobile phones off or to silent, and can those joining us online please turn off your cameras and microphones so that the meeting is not disturbed. I'll now introduce those taking part in the committee today. To my left are the officers from our legal, democratic and highways teams, and to my right, to my right are the planning officers and legal and highways officers, who will present the applications. On the wings of the tables are the councillors who will debate and decide the applications. The format will be as per the published agenda, and a copy of the officer reports can be found on the council website. Each application will be taken in turn. Officers will outline each application, followed by public speaking time. Only members of the public who have registered to speak can make representation, and councillors around the table will then debate and decide on each application. During the debate, there will be a proposer and a seconder for a resolution. Members will vote on the proposal. Only members who have been present throughout the whole application will be able to vote, and the voting options are for, against, abstain and defer. Votes will be counted and the result announced. And just before we go into the main agenda, I'd just like to welcome two new members sat at the table here, and that is Catriona Herbert, who is our legal officer, and also Adam Garland from Highways, who will be taking questions on the first application. So welcome everybody, and welcome back to Dawn as well, Dawn Freeze. So we go straight into the agenda now, and first we have apologies for absence, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We received apologies from
Sorry.
we received apologies from absence from Councillor Tony Grimes, Councillor Hilary Bruce, Councillor Mike Murphy, and Councillor Jill Slocum.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, minutes from the previous meeting. To approve the minutes from January's meeting. We have a proposer. Do we have a seconder? Yep, Councillor Ham. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Next item is declarations of interest. Catriona, would you just like to briefly take us through the declarations of why we need to declare them? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? I press the right button. Just a reminder to members of the benefit of those visiting the committee today, that members are obliged under their own code of conduct and as expanded upon in the code of good practice for planning to declare various different types of interests which will relate to their financial and employment interests, other registrable interests, and some category of interest described as non-registrable interests. The members get full training on their obligations under the code, and depending on the interest declared, they may or may not be able to take part in the meeting. All of this is designed to preserve public confidence and the integrity and transparency of decision making. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I would like to declare an interest in a planning application for 11 Church Street, Bridgewater, as a member of Bridgewater Town Council, but I have not taken part in any of the discussions and come here with an open mind. Thank you. Councillor Smedley.
Exactly the same.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer.
I was just a normal member of the Axbury Drainage Board who are the consultees, but I've taken no part in their comments.
Councillor Hendry.
Same as Councillor Bowman, I'm on the Axbury Drainage Board. No conversation with any, basically anything.
Thank you. Thank you. Next we come to the public speaking time. There are a number of members of the public who have registered to speak. I'll call you when we are debating before we're about to debate the application, which brings us to the next item, which is the first application, and that is the application, an outline application for Willavington land north of Cossington Lane. Zach, would you like to take us through the application, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, happy to. Before I do, just ask for some patience and sympathy from members, because this isn't my application. This was an application that Louise Newcombe, who you may recall was our principal officer, team leader. She was the case officer of this application and wrote the report. Really sadly, Louise left us last week to take up another interim post in the Midlands. And so it's fallen on me to do the presentations today. But I'm very lucky that Dawn's agreed to come along and do the lead planning officer role. So yeah, the first application, we moved to Willavington, land off north of Cossington Lane. It's an outline application with all matters preserved apart from the means of access, and I'll show you the means of access in a bit. It's for up to 150 dwellings with public open space, landscaping and associated works. And as I said, vehicular access will be provided via Cossington Lane with other pedestrian and cycle connections. The main considerations that I'm going to talk you through, but you would have seen that there's a very comprehensive and long report in the agenda. But the main considerations in this instance will be the principle of development, the mix and tenure of the residential units, including affordable housing, design and the indicative layout and parameters of the scheme, albeit noting that this is an outline and would be followed, if permission were to be granted, would be followed by a detailed reserved matters application or applications. Obviously, access and highway impacts, sustainability, ecology, biodiversity, impact on trees, flood risk and drainage, heritage, impact on residential amenity, albeit as an outline, we don't have details of the heights and locations for exact plots, etc. Contamination, open space and place-based provision, waste, viability and planning obligations, and there's quite a substantial list of planning obligations set out on page 65 of the agenda, and any other considerations. But I won't go through all of these because it would take me forever, but the report covers all of those. So if we just go on to slide 3. This is showing the site location. But to the right, you can see the centre of the site. It's sort of two fields, creating a sort of T shape. And the star shows the application site, and you can see it zoomed in to the left there. Access off Cossington Lane to the south, but with a pedestrian cycle access to the west, leading into the road there. For context, as it's set out in the report, we have got another 2 applications from Willavington, the most at the moment that are undetermined yet and haven't come to committee. Possibly the most relevant to this application is the one directly to the north of the site. I'll talk about the relationship with that in a second, but that's for, I believe, up to 117 homes. I'll just go on to the site location. This just shows it in its context. So to the southeast of Willavington, but a fairly sizable chunk of land to the east of the road there. Access arrangements, as I say, this is Cossington Lane, and the proposed is for fairly central vehicular access. So one single point of vehicular access to serve the up to 150 dwellings. I will talk through the package of of section 106 obligations, but in terms of the highways access matters, because that isn't reserved, that includes things like the widening of Cossington Lane, the construction of the new site access with a ghosted right turn access junction. We're seeking to secure the extension of the 30-mile-an-hour zone, and you can see that from the plan there across the site frontage. Construction of new section of the footway and cycleway accessing the southwest corner of the site, and construction of new footway, cycleway and emergency access into the northwestern corner of the site. I'll touch on access in a sec, but we do have our highways going here. This is what we've known as the parameter plan. It is an outline after all. And this is just showing the main point of access to the south there, pedestrian cycle permeability, and to the north here you can see a little arrow showing links through to the potential development of the northern site, which is outside of the control of the applicant. Just go through here. I think there's some really sorry, I'm sharing the wrong. Sorry. Just need to if there was a plan I had there. Apologies, I'm just going to share this screen. Yeah, okay. Hopefully it will catch up in a second. Okay. So yeah, sorry everyone. I have the old presentation on. So none of the slides previous were changed, so that's reassuring. But yeah, this is the parameter plan, and as I said, there was a potential link through in terms of pedestrian and cycle and active travel link through to the development to the north if that comes forward. And then we go on to what's the illustrative master plan. As I say, this is not in great detail because it is only intended to demonstrate that 150 up to 150 homes could be delivered, but it's showing a sort of essential access from the main access road with spurs off in these wide development parcels, and then open space to the north and the east, and that creates a sort of helps to create a landscape buffer and sort of help integrate it into the wider landscape character to the east here, with some additional planting to the southeast corner there. And if I can just go on to these drawings are actually from the other planning application, which is 15 of the same year rather than 11. And it just shows that consideration has been given by both committees, Brookhomes and the other applicants to the north to a potential active travel connection between the development parcels. You'll see that with the little moniker of a pedestrian here, but you'll see that the way the outline master plan has been laid out in terms of illustrative master plan, there is a potential link shown through there, and we think that if for good planning, proper planning, if the northern side does come forward, it would be important to create that active travel between the two developments, and it's pleasing to see that's been acknowledged by both applicants. In terms of site photographs, so here we have the properties on Southfield Close, you can see here, with the Cossington Lane and the hedgerow boundary to the front of the site to the south. This is looking across the site, across the field. So you can again see the properties in Southfield Drive. This is the access, proposed potential to travel access to between the existing properties going into the application site. Further along Cossington Lane and further along, you can see points of access is along this hedgerow, and there would be some widening of this road, and the proposal is to limit it to 30 miles an hour. As I said before, that would have to be done through the legal agreements, and you can just about see the properties on Southfield Close here. Another shot of the site, but this is from the other side, so you can see the site is actually beyond this field, and those are the properties in Woollavington. So this is looking from the north down, if you like. Sorry. Further photograph showing a public right of way, the industrial properties on Cossington Lane, and the location of the site relative to Woollavington. So this is a longer distance view, and then further photograph of access on Coombe Lane and the site in the distance. In terms of the planning balance, this development does deliver up to 150 homes with 30% affordable housing at a time where our 5-year land supply sits at 4.17 years. So the paragraph 11D of the National Planning Policy Framework says that we should be approving this unless there are material considerations that show that there are detrimental impacts that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme. So this table is just intended to show what weight the officers are affording to each of these things. I should make it clear that it's come to committee, so you are the decision-making body, and it is for you to appoint an appropriate level of weight to each of the considerations. But this is intended as a guide, and it is how we've reached the recommendation that we have for the Draft Planning Commission. So on the green side, as it were, in favour of granting permission, would be the provision of market housing when we've only got 1.17 years, and we would offer that significant weight. The fact they're proposing a full complement of affordable housing, so 30% policy compliant, we would say is significant. There are benefits in terms of pedestrian, cycle and highway infrastructures which would be provided as part of the development, but obviously part of that is to mitigate the impacts of development. So we're only affording that moderate weight. Biodiversity net gain, as you would be aware, that that's now a statutory requirement for planning applications. So again, whilst there is a minimum of 10% biodiversity net gain achieved through the development, we're only offering that moderate weight. In terms of public open space, green infrastructure connections, again, the public open space would be required to service the development, but it could be used by the wider community. And again, moderate weight. Surface water drainage, obviously drainage is being proposed to mitigate the impacts of development and to ensure that it doesn't relate to create flooding elsewhere outside of the site, and that the site is properly protected from flooding, and obviously as a flood risk assessment submitted for the application. And then we're giving that moderate weight. And then in terms of economic financial implications, obviously during the construction phase there would be localised employment There's also things like, council tax payments, etc. But we're only affording those limited weight. On the other hand, in terms of the impacts, the harmful impacts, we're saying that there is a significant landscape impact, but we're saying that overall the harms aren't so don't clearly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The loss of agricultural land is somewhat inevitable, but this is lower grade agricultural land. Heritage, there's only very limited impact on any designated heritage or undesignated heritage assets. Flooding, we're only giving that a limited impact because it is being dealt with through the engineering to support the scheme. Character of the area, again, this is slightly subjective, but we're saying it's very limited or negligible, albeit that's really in terms of the character of Woollavington, whereas we're saying in terms of the landscape, given that you've got a greenfield undeveloped site, that the impacts will be significant. Pollution, in terms of ground conditions, etc., we're saying very limited and negligible to negligible. And residential amenity, obviously there are properties to the west of the site, Suffield Close, and it's important that any reserve matters application, that very close attention is paid to those properties to ensure that they're not overlooked, they don't have a significant loss of outlook, that their privacy is protected and protected from noise, etc. But we're comfortable that a scheme of 150 units could be developed here, up to 150 units, sorry, could be developed here that would not necessarily have an impact, detrimental impact in that regard. In terms of the updates to the report, you'll have seen from the website that we did update a report relating to an earlier refused application for this site. This is purely for information purposes only, and that decision was taken at a time when we did have a 5-year land supply, so there were different considerations at that stage. It was meant to be within the agenda, and apologies that it's been uploaded at a later date. And I think members probably have seen the briefing notes, very short briefing note from Bloor Homes that was circulated to you by our Democratic Services team towards the end of last week. So, in summary, we acknowledge that there will be some landscape impact. I think when you're developing a greenfield site that's previously undeveloped land, there is always going to be an element of that. Nevertheless, we have to be very cognizant of our current lack of a 5-year housing land supply, which creates a tilted balance being applied to the development, which says that we should be granting planning permission unless that any harmful impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. We've weighed all of the benefits against the harms. We do acknowledge that there would be some landscape harms amongst others as set out in this table, and I'll leave that table up when you're debating. But in conclusion, we believe that the benefits, the significant public benefits to be accrued from allowing 150, up to 150 new homes where we don't have a 5-year land supply, and 30% of these being in the form of affordable housing in a mix that's set out that meets our housing requirements and is set out in the report and would be secured by a Section 106 legal agreement. We believe that those harms are outweighed. In terms of highways, I've got my highways colleague here. I won't go into great detail here, other than to say that, as set out in the report, the conclusion is that the means of access subject to means of access off Costington Lane, subject to the highways improvements as discussed, the 30-mile-an-hour zone, the widening, the provision of appropriate visibility, that the impacts of the development, albeit obviously it will create a certain number of additional vehicular movements. The officer's view, in conjunction with the response from highways, is that there wouldn't be any significantly harmful impacts, and that the cumulative impacts and the impacts on the highway network would not be severe, and that's the test that's set out in the NPPF. You probably recall us saying that pretty much every committee meeting. Obviously, if there are questions around highways, please do ask those. And then finally, I was just going to say, if you indulge me, I was just going to say that the recommendation is to approve the application and grant planning permission, subject to conditions and subject to the Section 106 legal agreement. But obviously, because that Section 106 agreement hasn't yet been finalised, we're asking that if members are minded to resolve to grant permission, that you would delegate this final decision to the chair in consultation with the chief planning officer once the agreement has been completed. Or if the Section 106, if we can't reach agreement on Section 106 within 6 months, if we're not going to reach agreement, then we do have ability under the council's scheme of delegation in the constitution to refuse permission. But if we were nearly there, we would bring it back to members to say where we are in 6 months' time. So the planning obligations are set out on pages 65 and 66. And I'll just quickly go through those. So it's quite a big package of Section 106 obligations here. So provision of a travel plan, including a travel plan fee and a safeguarding sum. The highways improvements I touched on earlier, widening of Cossington Lane, the construction of the site access with a new ghosted right turn access junction. And there would need to be a separate application. I believe I'm right in saying that would be under Section 278 of the Highways Act, because that involves works within the public highway. There'd be clauses to secure the extension of the 30-mile-hour speed limit across the whole site frontage, the construction of new footway and cycleways, and then in terms of cycle improvements and public transport, it says here estimated £350,000, and this was to provide enhanced cycleways along the east of Wolverhampton Hill and to upgrade the crossing and link to Higher Road, and to enhance the bus service 375 to an hourly service 6 days a week through a second bus. Now, the other developments would be proposed housing developments to be required to make proportionate contributions as well towards that. The figure is actually changed now. It's slightly lower than 350. I think it's 342,000 or something in that region. So, but as set out there. In terms of affordable, it will be securing 30%. So that would be up to 45 units. I say it says up to because the scheme is up to 150, but it would be proportionate. So if you had 100 units rather than 150, you would have 30 units of affordable housing. I've only used that because my maths isn't good enough to do it. And in terms of social rent, that would be 85% social rent. And 15% shared ownership, obviously to be agreed through the Section 106. There's a contribution towards the NHS towards increasing primary care infrastructure at Poldham Medical Practice, Wolverhampton Surgery and Poldham Medical Practice, the Eddington Surgery, and that's around £100,000. Public open space, so provision of LEAP, so locally equipped area of play, and laps, local area of plays. I don't know what play on the way is, I'm afraid, but perhaps the one to me in a minute if there's any questions about that. And then management and maintenance of the public open space, and then finally the habitat management and monitoring plan. And monitoring to be related to the fact that there will be 10%, at least 10%, biodiversity net gain improvements. I won't go through the conditions, but they're as listed on page 66 onwards. So in summary, applying the tilted balance, whilst we note the concerns that are being raised by the Parish Council and by local residents, and we do accept that there would be some impacts in terms of harmful impacts in terms of landscape, particularly we believe that safe access can be achieved as per the submitted details, and that the site is capable of accommodating up to 150 units comfortably with a good layout scheme. And just what I've mentioned there is that one of the conditions you've seen there is that we are requiring any reserve matters application to go through the quality review panel to ensure that we get a high quality final scheme. And that's been agreed with the applicant. But applying the tilted balance, we believe that the harmful impacts do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the overall package of benefits. And on that basis, we do recommend approval subject to section 106 and conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zach. I'll have a number of speakers on this item, and I'd like to invite Joe Stradlin to come to the table, please. Just need to ensure that your microphone is switched on. That's right, that's it. And you have 3 minutes. So just let us know when you're ready to start and we'll set the timer. Thank you.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Do you want to give me a countdown? Count me in, I'm going to maximise these if I can.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
Hello, everybody. I'm going slightly off script. It sounds to me like Mr. Elwood doesn't really support this application in this location, but they're bound by the fact that the council themselves haven't got a demonstrable plan for where housing should be in this area. I would urge you to reject this. It is the wrong place for this development. No one in Cossington or Woollavington supports this. The impact on the area is negative. There is no positive to be had to the residents of the area of this. We've already talked about the other applications that are going or that have been put in the area. This is the worst location of the 3. I know you have to judge them on their own merits, but actually because of the gravity and the Agritas battery plant, there is a rush to get applications in to build houses in this area. This is the first one. You should not approve it just because it's the first one that's come along. Your own planning officer states the number of houses required in Woollavington is around about 70 in the statement. This number greatly exceeds this on its own. Cossington, the adjacent village, has already met its quota, and Cossington is barely mentioned within this. And actually, the impact on Cossington will be far greater than it is on Woollavington. 150 homes may be considered sustainable in its own right, but when it's considered within the location to adjacent villages, it's anything but. Cossington's a tier 4 settlement. It only has a pub which is due to close in the next month and doesn't have a reopening date. There's no jobs, just a park. Woollavington similar, it's got no pub. 37 clubs about to close for at least a year. The school's oversubscribed. The doctor's surgery struggling to cope. It won't be connected to the main village by a meaningful transport route, except for the walking and cycling route. 150 homes would be approximately half the size of Cossington, and approving this would begin the process of dominating the neighbouring small village of community of Cossington and spread beyond the existing settlement boundary of Woollavington. Indeed, Woollavington Hill and its adjacent properties currently form a sensible boundary to the village and its separation from its smaller neighbour to the east. Both villages want to maintain their independence. Traffic is already a problem in the area. The B341A39 junction is a problem. It's stated in the planning assessment that it's going to get worse. We're probably talking at least 300 cars from this. Apparently a wait of up to 10 minutes at this junction will be acceptable, and they're not going to do anything about it. It's unacceptable. You rejected a previous application on this site, which was the right thing to do. Please do the same here. If you are minded to approve it, maybe conditions imposed such as traffic exiting the site turn right towards Woollavington only to protect Cossington. There's no footpaths along the road. There's none in Brent Road in Cossington. There's a park, there's pedestrians, there's cyclists. Sorry for overrunning slightly. That's pretty much all of it. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. You raised some issues. Now what we'll do is we'll take when all the speakers have spoken, then because some may be duplicated, but we'll pick them up at the end.
Yeah, no, that's
All
fine.
right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Alan Williams, please.
Right, is that working?
From when you're ready to start.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee.
I'm Alan Williams from Grassroots Planning, acting on behalf of Southwest Strategic Developments Limited, or SWSD. They are the promoters of the current application for up to 170 dwellings to the north of this site, which has been running in parallel to this application. The SWSD application should be before you in the next month or so, following positive collaboration with officers. It is later coming to committee as it has had the benefit of the Quality Review Panel, or QRP, to ensure high quality design. We support the principle of development, but wish to comment on points of detail. The cumulative principle of the current schemes proposed in Willamington is accepted by the council, with proposals being a sustainable two-tier settlement, and where the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. It was also clear from QRP that they firmly support the residential growth to the east of Willamington and want to ensure that both the SWSD and Law Home schemes have appropriate linkage and cohesion. It is therefore disappointing that Law has decided not to engage with QRP at the outline stage, which would have allowed for a consistent design approach being adopted. The matters from QRP have been addressed by SWSD scheme, as well as a design principles document prior to determination to guide how the future detailed design will come forward. This has also resulted in considerable benefits to not only the wider residents of the SWSD site, but also the Law Home site and, importantly, the wider Willamington community. A very significant package of on and off-site highways and infrastructure measures is being offered by SWSD, with a strong emphasis on promoting active and sustainable travel and to provide genuine connectivity and permeability with the existing settlement. In addition to the substantial bus contribution, the package includes traffic calming measures along Willamington Hill over and above the consented gravity scheme, including an additional raised zebra crossing, upgrading the existing footway to the north of Coombe Lane to a shared footway and cycleway, and the existing zebra crossing near the existing play park, but a parallel crossing to allow cyclist and pedestrian usage. Our illustrative master plan also shows intent to provide an active travel connection to this Law Home site. It is clear that it should not be an either-or scenario with these schemes. A decision on this application should also not be to the detriment of the SWD proposal, where many of the benefits highlighted are unique and will only be delivered and realised through the SWSD scheme. The access arrangements of this application are not reserved matter details relevant to the determination of this outline application. It is essential that a cohesive design approach is adopted and there is consistency in decision making. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Alan Sharp of Willamington Parish Council. Please. There we go. 3 minutes from when you're ready to start. Thank you.
Although Willamington Parish Council are not objecting to this application, we are raising a material consideration and condition issue, which, although being addressed in the officer's report, we disagree with the conclusion made. Section 12.47 states that the A39 B3141 junction is currently over capacity and safety concerns as per HIRA's report on application 542514, and that contribution for both cycle path improvements and public transport services has been sought and agreed, which in effect encourages a modal shift and alleviate the vehicular impact of the new development junction. It should be stressed, no evidence has been presented to show how this modal shift from car to cycling or public transport can be achieved to provide any alleviation of the vehicular impact of the development on the junction. In the absence of any hard evidence, the implication is that as it is over capacity, the only alleviation would be no additional car movements from this development, which is extremely naive as we are a rural community and need cars to get to places. If this approach is left unchallenged, then it will set a precedent for the other two ongoing applications in Willamington for up to an additional 230 homes, leading to an unacceptable situation at this junction without any effective mitigation. Therefore, we are requesting the committee defers a decision and ask Highways to model various scenarios to identify the most appropriate capacity improvements for this junction to manage the increase in vehicular movements from this development and combinations of the other two developments. contribution costs for the identified mitigation should be included in the 106. And it is suggested that they are added to the other required funding commitments so that any viability assessments can be undertaken to identify any risk of mitigation for the development going forward. In keeping with Somerset Council's aim of greater devolution, we request an involvement in and signature to the 106 with regard to the transfer of the open spaces, suds, swell, play areas to the parish council with an agreed commuted sum. This we have done with previous applications successfully and will enable us to directly manage these assets along with all the other ones that we control for the benefit of our community without the need of interfacing with a management company who may have differing priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now have Georgia Terry from Cossington Parish Council, please.
Cossington Parish Council.
Oh, sorry, can you just pop your microphone on, please, and then we'll put the timer on, that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cossington Parish Council are both surprised and concerned of a lack of consideration given to T4 Cossington to the east, which is liable to suffer a greater impact than Tier 2 Woollavington, as has occurred with many of the other smaller developments that have taken place over recent years along Cossington Lane. Let's look at the proximity. At its closest point, the proposals are only about 200 metres from Cossington, leading down to its award-winning playing field, with the built form continuing right into the village with a mixture of residential and commercial properties. And let's look at the scale, 150 dwellings. That's around half of the number of dwellings in Cossington as a total. And if you look at the other proposal that's being considered to the north, has been mentioned earlier, you're talking about something with more houses than are in Cossington itself, right on the doorstep of the village. Then looking at traffic and safety. Have you seen Cossington Lane? It's a narrow, unlit road with no footpaths, barely wide enough for 2 cars, let alone the agricultural and commercial vehicles and buses that regularly travel along the route. Problems at the A39 junction with Woollavington has resulted over the past year or so of it increasingly being used as a rat run, where traffic comes along Cossington Lane to the east to avoid it and travels up through Cossington, up through Brent Road, Manor Road, and up to the A39 to emerge by Grade 2 Moon Cottage. It's of course, and this is likely to get worse, the development. It's obvious. People aren't just going to sit there and continue on with the waits at the A39. It's in a poor state of repair at the road edges, which has caused several ditch-related accidents. And this is a problem along its length, not just around the entrance to the development where what's being talked about here. It's dangerous for the many pedestrians, cyclists who use it, and many have been deterred from using it, going against some of the council's objectives. It needs much more attention than just around the proposed entrance. It needs along the way, right up to the Sustrans footpath and cycle route. So in summary, this will have a tremendously major impact on Cossington, and it threatens its existence as a self-contained village. And this is against the implicit principles in strategic and place-making policies in the local plan. We appreciate the need for more houses, but there are better, less damaging sites. So therefore, we strongly recommend approval. Sorry, refusal. Approval of review.
Thank you. And our final speaker, Mike Curtin, please. 3 minutes from when you're ready to start.
Good afternoon. By way of introduction, my name is Mike Curtin. I'm the Planning Director at Bloor Homes, the applicant for this outline planning application on the land to the north of Cossington Lane, Woollavington. I'm extremely grateful to Mr. Elwood for his presentation to this committee. I welcome the recommendation to approve this application. The proposals provide a genuine opportunity to deliver a high quality development in a sustainable location that will support the council in meeting its housing requirements. In doing so, the scheme can make an important contribution to housing delivery in the short term. This is particularly relevant to the current housing delivery shortfalls that exist across Somerset and within the former Sedgemoor local plan area. Meeting a housing shortfall is an important material consideration in the decision-making process, but we also recognise this does not remove the need to ensure proposals are sustainable and will deliver high-quality places. Our outline application will provide up to 150 new homes. It includes policy-compliant affordable housing and has been informed by extensive investigations and analysis, responding positively to identified constraints and opportunities. Approximately 38% of total site area will provide a public open space and green infrastructure, ensuring that development will be set within a high quality natural environment. Whilst the proposals are in outline form, the proposals have been informed by engagement from Wolverhampton Parish Council and local residents, and Bloor Homes are committed to delivering high quality development. As you heard from the case officer, we've committed to providing our detailed proposals to the quality review panel to ensure that our detailed scheme is thoughtfully considered. We recognise the concerns of residents on the impact of this development on the local highway network and also matters related to flood risk. Both matters have been fully assessed in our application submission, and the Somerset Highways and the lead local flood authority agree that our proposals are acceptable. We have agreed with council officers through planning conditions and planning obligations, section 106, to mitigate any impacts arising from this proposed development. Through this process, our scheme supports enhancements to local bus services and local pedestrian and highway active travel network. Additional contributions on matters such as health, education were also agreed through the section 106 and community infrastructure levy. We are aware of the other applications currently being considered by Somerset Council, including the land to the north. Our proposals make provision for pedestrian and cycle connections to this land should this application be approved. As a house builder, we are distinct from the other applications that have currently been submitted in Wolverhampton in that we actually build houses, we're not land traders. We're committed to the delivery of this high quality development, and the proposals in summary assist the council in meeting its housing shortfall. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, speakers. A number of issues raised there, which would be grateful if planning officers might respond to or address. The junction traffic generation and junction with the A39 being a major one. Potential impact on Cossington and the road usage as a rat run along there. And I'll leave it for that for now, and then I'll pick up any that you haven't picked up on.
Thank you. As you might expect, I'm going to defer most of the highway ones to the highway officer. But in terms of the other points raised, so one of the speakers did raise that we were reluctantly recommending approval. We're not reluctantly recommending approval. We are recommending approval. So apologies if there was uncertainty presented in the presentation. As Zach expressed to start off with, he isn't the case officer, so he's had to come and pick up a lot of information on relatively short notice. In terms of the principle, and whether the principle is acceptable. So there was a point in terms of the minimum amount of growth for Wolverhampton. So under policy T2A, there is a minimum growth set out under policy T2A for 150 over the plan period. So that's a minimum, it's not a cap. There's 70 left of the 150. The outline permission, the outline report you were given previously is the same site we recommended refusal for when we had a 5-year land supply and when the 150 allocated growth was taken up, because there was a consent in place that accommodated for the full extent of that growth. So one of the permissions that was granted planning permission was not commenced on time, which is why there is now a shortfall of 70, which has put this back into the T2A considerations. Under T2A, the second part of the policy sets out what the scheme must comply with outside of the settlement boundary. So this is right next to the settlement boundary for Wolverhampton. I understand the concerns from Cossington because it is also quite close to Cossington, but it would be read in policy terms under T2A. And the question for members is, are we satisfied that it complies with policy T2A for the considerations of this application? The other things, so in terms of, there was a request to refer the application for junction modelling. So on page 45 of the report, it does set out the transport assessment submitted with the application has undertaken junction modelling. So that work has been done and has informed part of the report that's before members now for consideration. There is also questions about what mitigation is going to result in the shift change. So again, on that page, there's reference to other consented positions where there are 106 obligations that are required to be delivered. And in the 106 obligations on page 65, that does set out the financial obligations that are being imposed on the developer for the scheme. It also sets out the actual mitigations that the developer for the scheme would be required to demonstrate. It is an outline, so what we're looking at is the principle, the access, and for us, we've also put in the pedestrian and cycle infrastructure connection as well as part of this consideration. There was reference by one speaker in terms of the quality review panel. It is true, the other application that's just to the north of this development, that one is going through the quality review panel process, which is why it's not ready and it's not before members. It was an approach that was strongly encouraged for this applicant. We are not able to force applicants into quality review panel if they're not willing. They weren't willing at this time, but given the information we had, the consultee responses we had, and the joint working with the placemaking team within the authority, we do not feel there's anything that would stop or prevent us making a decision on this application at this point. In terms of the council's very strong encouragement to engage in QRP to ensure detailed applications meet the expectations of the council for high quality development, the applicant has agreed to a condition for the reserve matters. Based on the advanced nature of some of the other applications around it and the awareness of the council of the strategic mitigation that's going in for the infrastructure, we're comfortable in terms of we've got sight of what financial mitigations or what highway mitigations would be required to make this development appropriate in terms of mitigating its own impacts. The only other thing I think I wanted to say was there are a number of conditions. Zach didn't list them out because it's not necessary, but so condition 4, we are securing the cycleway connections. We've also got water efficiency. We've also got sort of energy efficiency requirements for the reserve matters as well, as set out within the report. But for the highway specific stuff, I'll hand over to the highway officer. So Adam.
Good afternoon, everyone. There were a number of points made on the highway aspect of this application. And I think it might be helpful if I just went through some of those in turn, but equated them with the assessments we actually made during our consultation period. So we had a look. This development is up to 150 units. In traffic generation terms, that equates to in the region of 70 to 80 cars in the peak hour. There are times when people suggest that because modern couples both drive vehicles, the 150 houses could generate 300 vehicles in the peak hour. We have a nationally recognised database which assesses trip generation from all walks of life, all types of development, whether that's residential, commercial, industrial, or whatever. It is a nationally recognised database. As an authority, we accept the terms of the database, and that suggests that 150 houses will generate in approximately 70 to 80 vehicles in the peak hour. This is because the database accepts that not every single house is owned by a couple who both own cars. Some houses are owned by people who work from home, so they're not on the road during the peak hour. Some are retirees, some walk their children to school before they go to work, some walk to the bus. before they go to work. So if you look at the trip generation and the figures presented about how that traffic is disseminated across the local network, those 80 or so vehicles, 90% will head west from the development site. That means the junction to the west would be subject to approximately 72 vehicles in the peak hour. And of those, 43% head north and 47% head south. So the junctions north and south of this development site will be subject to in the region of 34 vehicles in the peak hour, which is approximately one vehicle every 2 minutes on average. Now, when you compare the fact that the roads in the area are already quite busy, some of them are bus routes, some of them have heavy traffic, people from outlying settlements heading towards Bridgewater, Taunton, M5 and this sort of thing. We as an authority cannot claim that that level of vehicular use, one vehicle every 2 minutes, is severe in highway terms. And that's the term we have to work with. That's the term that is quoted in the National Planning Policy Framework. You heard your planning officer earlier on say there are significant public benefits from this site. The 106 agreement will provide pedestrian cycling infrastructure. One of our speakers here queried whether pedestrian cycling infrastructure was adequate. The development will provide more. We have a pedestrian cycle route to the southwest corner. We have one halfway up the western side. That one will be an emergency access as well. There will be links through to the northern development site, and through the planning process, we can ensure that any link to the northern boundary goes up to the boundary, so there is no ransom strip situation created. The active and sustainable travel improvements can also be captured by a travel plan. And because of the safeguarding, the monitoring and this sort of thing, the council has the ability to make sure that the modal shift that has been suggested can actually be achievable. The contribution is being paid, which will go towards active travel, passenger transport infrastructure improvements. The concern was also that the road network in the local area is, to quote one of the speakers, dangerous. We have assessed the collision data we hold on record provided to us by the local constabulary. The 5-year data that we have does not back up any inherent highway safety issues. There, I saw a couple of reports for collisions. Just to clarify, collisions on the database and on the publicly accessible website, which is called Crash Map, are given one of 3 ratings, if you like. They are fatal, severe, or slight. I've seen a couple of slight collision reports, and the causes, as given to us by the constabulary, suggest driver error and not an inherent safety issue on the highway. The other development sites in the area are also bringing forward highway benefits similar to this. The speed limit can be extended along Cossington Lane. The mitigation works within the Section 106 agreement, which can include all the highway works appropriate clauses, will be, as you've heard, a ghosted right turn lane off Cossington Lane, widening of Cossington Lane, speed limit extension, footway cycleway improvements, the contribution for active and sustainable travel. Putting all that together, taking all that into account, the Highway Authority assessments have said this development will not create a severe impact on the local highway network, and therefore it is acceptable in highway terms. Thank you.
Thank you. I also recall comments regarding GP health capacity and full oversubscription. I know that is contained within the report, but would you just like to respond to that? The school through the SIL, isn't it? And a funding contribution for local
Yes.
authorities.
So within the north area, unless it's specifically mentioned in an allocation for development, so like we have in some of the Bridgewater allocation sites, technically the SIL obligation ask or the education ask is used by SIL. Often the ask by education is greater than the pond of money that we have in the SIL receipts. But it is an issue that is that we're aware of. In terms of GP provision, as part of planning applications, we do consult with the NHS. In this case, I'm assuming the NHS didn't respond or didn't have an ask, because I'm just double checking whether we got it listed as an obligation. I know we have got it listed as an obligation, sorry. So we've got a contribution of £100,220 going to the NHS. So whilst we cannot pay for staff, we have to pay for space. The request from the NHS has said, with this amount of increase in population, we would require an increase in space to the value of a floor space of X, and that's what the value is. So again, with the caveat, if there is a resolution to grant in 6 months or so, we often go back to the consultees and just recheck their figures to make sure the 106 are up to date with the up-to-date figures.
Chair.
Yeah.
Just through you, Chair, just two very quick ones. So, yeah, apologies if I sounded like in my presentation that I didn't support the scheme. That wasn't my point at all. If you ask me my preference is for all developments to be on brownfield sites, previously developed land, or within dense urban areas. But I'm a realist as a planner, and I appreciate that's not going to get us to our significant housing numbers that are dictated to us, which we've identified, and the increase that's being dictated to us. So in the context of where we are with the 5-year land supply, and the policies, you know, I am fully supportive of the recommendation before members. I just want to make that point. And then the other point that hasn't been picked up by any of us, was from Wool Uppington Parish Council. It's around open space, and there was comment that they would like to be involved in the Section 106 process in terms of where public open space goes to, who has responsibility. I'm very, if members do resolve to grant permission subject to the Section 106, we're very happy to facilitate those discussions between Floorhouse and the parish council. Obviously, we can't guarantee that we'll reach an agreement on that, but you know, that would be something that would be possible to be discussed. It has happened elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. First Councillor Martin, then Councillor Hendry, opening up for members now.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all the speakers and to Zach for the presentation. Very comprehensive, very useful. I must pin my colours to the mast initially and say that I don't generally make adverse comments regarding large-scale developments, because I'm very cognizant of the 5-year supply question, and I'm, Zach said, a realist. I understand how things work in the commercial world and the planning world. I've been doing this a long time with many other people around this table. However, in this instance, I must say that I do think this is in the wrong place. I go through that the junction, 39 junction, very frequently, and it is always a sticking point. And I can't help but think that, aside from all the other notes that I've made, that junction, the 39 junction, is going to be a problem. I appreciate our colleague and friend's comments on the modelling and the mapping that was done on the 39 junction, and the idea that a percentage will go north, a percentage will go west or wherever it went, and a percentage south. I think personally, I think that's for the birds, because cars want to get out onto the 39 and get down to Bridgie quickly, get out onto the M5 quickly. Modelling is all very well, but I again, maybe it's because I'm a realist, I see those cars there frequently. So that's the first point, really. My question isn't one of the development, it is one of the location of the development, and not specifically with regard to the villagers that live nearby, although again, I'm cognizant of that. It's because of that junction. That junction will be a problem. We're going to have the construction traffic going in and out of that junction. They're not going to go through Willabington and Cossington. Big trucks take those joists, etc., for the roofing for houses. They're going to have to get in there, and they're going to have to get out again. It's going to cause more problems. Again, this is just a real life situation. It's not idealism. So that was my first statement, nailing my colours to the mast. Disagree with the concept, not because of the concept, but because of the location. You commented on the parish council to be involved in the section 106. I appreciate that. Thank you. I would be in favour of that. The S278, maybe going back to my first question, the section 278 contributions that are being made, I might suggest that if they are to be made, that they don't go on the junction directly to the west of the site itself, but do concentrate, as somebody mentioned earlier, they do concentrate on the 39 junction. That is going to be the sticking point. No, don't tell so I can catch up my notes. Done that one. The 5-year supply, we come to this so frequently. We discuss it every week, the 5-year supply. It seems like a moving goalpost idea. So an overarching question would be from my point of view as a member of this committee, and so somebody that's interested in planning, an overarching planning question, when can we say that we've achieved the 5-year thing? It just seems to, as soon as we kick the ball, the goal goes further away. So when can we say we've done our 5-year bit? I appreciate somebody mentioned the idea of, or not the idea, the fact of Willabington being a tier 4 settlement and having played its part in the development. Unfortunately, I believe that's not necessarily how it works with the numbers across the county. But again, I'm mindful and sympathetic to that. Educational Services made a comment as part of their consultee query that they would require, or they would look for SIL payments to cover extra strain on the educational services. SIL wasn't mentioned. We've mentioned section 106. Can we clarify what that means? Do they mean section 106 when they say SIL? No. So if we can clarify what that goes towards in the contributions towards educational services. And I think that wraps up my diatribe. Fine with the planning application, not too happy about the location. Look at that junction. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Officers, do you wish to respond?
Well, still would just be a flat payment per square metre that would be payable on all of the houses apart from the 30% affordable homes. So there would be a contribution that would be done based on our SIL charging schedule. So that can be drawn down, it can be called upon by the educational authority. They tend to wait till they've got a project and the pot builds up. The idea is the SIL pot builds up and then it is used to support infrastructure improvements generally.
So does that mean that the parish council, sorry, I apologise, does that mean that the parish council wouldn't feel the benefit of the SIL payments?
The parish council, if they have a made neighbourhood plan, would get 25% of the SIL payment. Or if they don't have a made neighbourhood plan, they'd get 15%. The rest goes into what's called the strategic SIL pot, and it's the strategic SIL pot rather than the local SIL pot that can be called on by education and GPs, etc. In this instance, the NHS, we have negotiated an actual contribution towards the healthcare, as you'll have seen in the report and the presentation. And then the only other thing I was pick up, and obviously I'm not a highways expert, but I think there's a difference between the permanent impacts and the temporary impacts of construction of 150 homes. I think it would be a weak argument because all development involves certain level of traffic and obviously this would be subject to a SEMP, a construction management, environmental management plan for transport. So I would say that in itself would not be a strong reason for resisting to the application. But any other comments on highways? Perhaps we'll pick those up once all the members have spoken, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair and Councillors. Only a few small points, nothing complicated. I heard you mention, I'm not quite sure if it's a lamp or a leak. I sincerely hope it's fully, but I'm not quite sure when you picked up on that, but just come back to that, clarify it. Secondly, nobody's actually mentioned the dog walking area, and you would think at a development this size, lots of people have dogs, you can't have them just walking about the areas in between houses every time want to go for walking. Consider the mess that would make, so that might be an idea just to go along with that as well. Flood zone, unless I've done this on my reading, which I'm sure I have, to just clarify the flood zone, but you can't possibly do that bad because the houses either side of anyway. More importantly, all this, back to highways. I agree with everything that's been said to a point. The average number of cars from a 3-bedroom house, believe it or not, is not as much as people think it is. It's about 1.4. A 4-bedroom house is slightly more, it's about 2.1. So let's just work with the 1.4 for a minute. As was pointed out earlier, not everybody goes to work. Some do, some don't. Some work from home. Some people do the school run, some don't. So not all the cars are going to approach your junction at any one time. They go there, they do their job, go out and come back again. To restrict heavy goods vehicles coming in and out, regardless of what they're carrying, whether it's large timbers, cement, whatever the case. And I agree with the case officer again here. You cannot stop a construction site because of traffic coming and going. Work has to go on, work has to be done. Look forward to the main finished goal, which obviously is, I'm sure, 150 nice houses, whatever it may be. The junction, I've heard this before, the actual junction coming out onto the main road, highways people, very technical, very educated, know exactly what they're doing. If they go and they look at a junction, do their homework, and come back and say, it's acceptable, it's safe, it works, that's good enough for me. So just taking on all the points I said, and it's more important about the highways. I'll leave that there for a minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you wish? Yeah, Dawn.
Thank you. So just in terms of flood zone, it's flood zone 1. So it is set out in the report, but in case you missed it, so that's the lowest area of flood risk possible. There was consultation with the LLFA. There wasn't a response from, I think, the IDB or the EA because it was below their thresholds. Revised information was submitted. The LLFA are now happy, subject to conditions. There is a requirement on site for laps and leaps because of the size of the development, so they're listed in the headstones at the end of the document. And in terms of dog walking, obviously the detailed layout will follow, but the developer is sat in this room, so has heard that sort of expression of interest, if you like, for future layouts. I just also wanted to provide a point of clarity for the 5-year land supply in terms of something Councillor Martin said earlier, as in when do we get it back? You get it back on an annual basis. So once a year, we check what our 5-year land supply is against the government figures that we have to deliver. Effectively, what we haven't done is we haven't consented enough sites to demonstrate we've got 5 years in advance of sites that are ready to go relative to the numbers we've got. So at the moment, North is below 5. It's got the highest level in Somerset because North has always been quite good at supporting development, but it is below 5, which means in the NPPF, the tilted balance is in favour, which means when you're considering applications, you're already considering them with a tilted balance in favour of the development. So the harms have to be that much more weighty to outweigh the concerns. So, but it's refreshed on an annual basis. But I think the refreshing was done in February, so I think we're about a year.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you to all the people who spoke and officers both their advice and direction. I've been on the planning committee for 20 years now here at South North. And I regard this as a major application. Major applications, in order to know what we're talking about exactly and making decisions on people's lives. There was a time we used to go on a site visits when we came to these meetings, knew the area, knew the hedges, knew the ditches, knew the roads, knew the people, knew the junctions. A lot of us here are boxing blind. I'm 79, I've been on the A39 hundreds of times, been through Cossington, well, Abington, I know the area, but I wouldn't be able to sit here and pick up some of the things that have been said today. Our planning officer, Councillor Elwood, he's been put at the deep end at the last minute because of, and I'm afraid Dawn again is in the hot seat. She's got to pick up all the pieces. And I could see her and talk about the 5-year land supply. Traffic. Traffic is always going to be a problem in every development we're going to talk about. What we're going to do, go back to horse and cart? There's no easy solution to the traffic problems anywhere, unless everybody starts working from home. So that happens, I want more parking places. So you've got a bit of a sticky O end there. So really, I really like to walk this site with my fellow officers. I live in North Petherton, Ryerson, Cannington, Huntsville, Redknoll, Bridgewater, West Hay, Bridgewater, there you go. No one's actually local at that particular site, and to get a real interaction into, you know, and the gentleman just touched his tie there. No, I don't know why he did, but he did. But yeah, so really, I might like a look at this thing and move these on afterwards. You've got a 5-year land supply, but everything just takes too long, but the cost escalates. This is the whole problem with development. If cost was to go the other way, development would speed up. It's a fact. Development's gone up. No one's earning any money anymore. You can look at the papers. 3 or 4 developers go broke every week. The contractors, subcontractors, etc. That is the reality of all, because things take too long. I'm a farmer, by the way, so I know a little bit about spending money and costs. Everything go up and get out of your hand. Okay, so really, I'm going to propose a site visit, and what I'm looking for is a seconder, I think. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Can I just say, it is the responsibility of all of us on planning to get familiar with the sites. And I would hope that everyone sat around the table is familiar with where we're talking about, because it's here before us today. But you have made a proposal. I'm looking for legal advice at the moment. Do I need to take a seconder now, or can I continue debate?
Oh, sorry. From my experience at committee, just bailing Katrina out a little bit. Generally, the debate continues unless there is someone who wishes to stick their hand up next and also second the proposal, but effectively the proposal runs along with the debate, and either we get a seconder for that proposal at some point, or we get another proposal at another point, which then gets seconded, and it's whichever proposal is proposed and seconded first is the proposal that gets voted on.
Just for clarity, I touched my tie because I'm a bit nervous. I was, Councillor Bradford referred to me as Councillor Elwood. Now, I don't know if that's promotion or not, and I'm going to leave it there.
Okay.
Just for clarity, for those listening online, Mr. Elwood is not a candidate. No, he's our,
My apologies.
thank you, he's our interim area manager. So thank you. Okay, so we continue with Councillor Filmer.
Thank you, Mr. Elwood. We all get nervous then. Councillor Bradford starts speaking. It's not you personally, don't worry. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, this isn't an easy application. I mean, it wouldn't be before us if it was, but the 5-year land supply is a major issue we've got to deal with. I mean, obviously government changed the figures, which is why we don't need the 5-year land supply. So that leaves us with this tilted balance, which puts us in the difficult position that we're in. The fact that you were mentioning, I think, that just been said that we have this assessed every year. So it's only if we grant sites that weren't previously planned to be granted that we're going to start closing that 5-year land supply. So it's these sort of sites coming forward closes the gap for the future ones potentially if it goes through. The reason why I'm struggling with this one slightly is it's very similar to the vice chair position. When I was reading the report, we'd obviously been around these sites before in the past, neighbouring sites and the allocations when they came forward, and certainly the A39 junction was always a concern. And we had, my thought was we built in a cunning plan to how we were going to deal with that by contributions from developments as they came forward. And so I was fully expecting to see that in the report as I was reading through it, that we'll get to that point where we're going to get a contribution. And then we've decided actually we don't need to do that, we can do other things. And my concern with this is it works if we get the modal shift that we're talking about, getting people out of their cars and doing other things. If that doesn't happen, the fact that the report already states the highways say this junction is at its capacity already, it's working at that. Any increase is going to put that under further pressure. And the fact is, I know we can only deal with the applications that are in front of us, but we've seen in the report that there are neighbouring applications coming forward, and we're likely to see those happen. So whether we revisit that junction as a future planning application, I don't know, because each one in turn adds. So we were originally looking at 150 houses going in the plan. We're now potentially 80, I think, have already gone. We're now looking at 150 and 170 next door. That's 400. So that's about 2.5 times the number of houses we originally thought. And now we're saying that junction is going to be fine. And that's where I'm struggling. My problem is we have the highways experts who are put in front of the committee that it isn't a problem. So if we go to appeal, any inspector is going to say, well, okay, what does your highways expert say? And they're going to turn around and say, well, they say it's fine. So that leaves us as a committee in a really difficult position with the one that's in front of us now. And I think that's where I think we're going to struggle. There are a couple of other issues, and I've not decided which one I'm going on this one yet. But there's a couple of other things I'd like to just clarify as well. On, I think it's page 37, there's mention that obviously this has 30% affordable housing. It's an exception. I'm going to use the word exceptional site, probably isn't an exceptional site, but it's not one that was in the plan. We're saying that has to have the 30% affordables. Could I just have a reassurance? Is that open to viability discussions at a future point, or is that 30% set in stone that without us delivering 30%, this site cannot go ahead? Because again, that's something I would like to know as to where we're heading with this. There's reference 12.41 about emergency access where the cycleway is coming in onto the secondary access. So I'd like to know how that is done in such a way that that route doesn't become an unauthorised highways route if it's big enough for emergency services. How does that get worked on so that we don't have that as another access that shouldn't be? In a similar vein, it refers in the travel plan, page 47, and how that fact we have a travel plan will mean it will all work fine. I wonder is there any examples that we have of actual success of travel plans that have delivered these sort of modal shifts? Because without that, as I say, we're struggling. And yeah, on page 46, I've got sort of one last one. Yeah, it says that obviously these works that we're talking about, because the frontage of the site looks like it's quite sensible. The road's being widened. I think the photographs we had showed it's a mature hedge that's been very nicely cut. If we're widening the road at that point, is that all being ripped out, or is that being set back as a plan to gain not the frontage? Because again, that will open up the site to make it a lot more open than it currently is. So it was just really to understand those points, and I'm happy to hear the rest of the debate amongst members before I decide where I'm jumping on this one.
Okay, thank you. We'll take the highways questions at the very end, I think, but Mr. Elm.
Oh, just very quickly on the 30% affordable housing. So the intention is that that would be secured under this application through a section 106 agreement, which would tie any subsequent reserve matters because they become one application. And where you get enter into a section 106, provided Law Homes enter into section 106 willingly, which they have every intention of doing so. That section 106, we don't have to negotiate on that for up to 5 years. After 5 years, it could potentially be reopened. The only way would be if there was a deed of variation application that was put in by them, and that would come to the committee anyway if there was a viability argument. But at the moment, we've got no reason to believe there would be. So yes, it will be secured through the section 106. And I think issues around modal shift, etc., will leave for the end, as you said, Jen.
Councillor Bolt.
I'm not sure if I'm covering a little bit of what Bob has just spoken about. One of the previous applications on the way into Woollavington of the A39 on the left-hand side, Highways said they can't do it unless they were supposed to be building the roundabout on the A39. I'm not sure if we've got less traffic now than we did 5 years ago at that planning, or whether there's been a change in Highways' attitude brought about by this tilted balance. But while I'm looking here, I'd say highway infrastructure as a result of the last one was critical at that point. And that's the next thing is for Highways, what is their definition of severe, so that when anything comes to us again, we can say we've actually hit the severe mode. Is it subjective per officer or is it in writing to them?
Thank you. Like many other speakers as well, I'm sharing concerns about that junction with the A39. And in the report, it mentions the sum of 350,000, which I think you said was slightly reduced now to provide enhanced cycleways and also enhancing the bus service. But can that be broken down? Because I don't know how long that money would provide for an enhanced bus service and what happens at the end when the money runs out. That's my question regarding the highways issue.
Chair, in terms of the highway contribution, it hasn't been reduced. Well, only technically it's just been refined because we were told when we consulted, they had to do the calculations and they told us it would be approximately £350,000 and it came out at 342. So it's not as though Law Homes or we have suggested reducing the number. It's just that's the number attributed to this scheme, and the intention is that that would be broken down to a cost, an average cost per dwelling, which would be consistent with what we would want to apply to the other application to the north that I mentioned. So in terms of the breakdown, there is a small breakdown between what goes to cycle and what goes to bus improvements. But I don't know that those figures have been broken down any more than that. And obviously the other application, I appreciate that when the speaker talked about his disappointment with that Law hadn't engaged with the QRP process, the rest of that was mainly talking about their scheme, which obviously isn't for consideration now. And those discussions would have to be had with them to see if they're willing to, to make those contributions as well. But that's not for you to consider now. You're considering this application and what this application is delivering. I appreciate it's quite difficult to separate it when you know that there are other applications pending, but we have to make sure that this scheme stands on its own 2 feet and washes its face, as it were. We, officers believe that in terms of highways as my colleague has said, that the impacts would not be severe and that the packages of measures are welcomed, and would make a meaningful difference. But again, ultimately, I could probably sound like I'm passing, but ultimately you're the decision maker, not us. We can only tell you what our opinion is.
Thank you. So I think the one thing that I sort of peered at this red-green column thing for is obviously we have got in the green section pedestrian, cycle and highway infrastructure, and we've got it as a moderate benefit weighing in favour of the development because there are improvements, there will be cycleway connection points and there will be footpaths provided as part of the proposal and the contribution towards bus connections, all of which would result in a moderate improvement in terms of the highway situation and providing the infrastructure to actually enable the shift. So I think my previous examples of travel plans have been everyone gets a high-vis jacket and gets told good luck as they head out onto the highway, whether it's got an adequate cycle network or not. This one is getting some infrastructure provided as a result of the development. So a lot of encouraging people to make the modal shift is providing the infrastructure to enable them to do that. So in terms of sort of the wider infrastructure that this application is being considered in addition to, we are looking at it in addition to the village enhancement scheme that's set out as part of the gravity projects that's required to be delivered as part of the OVO, and the connections this scheme is proposing would connect into those wider improvements. So a lot of the concern about the junction being at capacity and that modal shift having not happened yet is true because that infrastructure connection isn't there yet. Similarly, for 150 residents, they're not there yet either. But the benefits highlighted in the green column by officers is that infrastructure, that provision, that push towards public transport is being done through this development. What I probably would have done, and this is no criticism to the slide pack, I probably also would have had highways on the harm side of it, because as members are raising and as I'm hearing, you know, it is that junction onto the A39 that is causing a problem. The content of the report does say it's at capacity, so there is a reliance on the modal shift occurring. So any intensification of that junction will result in a harm that should be considered in the weighing of that balance. So looking at the weight to be given to that harm, in paragraph 12.48 of the report, it does say the transport assessment summarises that outside the immediate vicinity, the impact of the development would be less than 3% and would result in negligible changes to the existing network. So whilst that junction is at capacity, if you add a negligible change on top of that, there will be harm because there will be an increase to that junction at capacity. But the conclusion from the highway officer was that was not considered to be severe for an NPPF test. And for us to be recommending a refusal on the basis of intensification of that junction on its own, it would have to be a severe impact. In addition to that, from a member perspective, we've got policy T2A, which does in principle support 70 further units in this location in accordance with that policy. So we're not in a position of looking at a greenfield site that's completely contrary to policy. It is aligning with T2A in terms of the policy requirements, but members are right, it is a harm that needs to be balanced in addition to the benefits that are being provided as well. So I don't think the highways infrastructure sits solely in the benefits. I think there should be a bit in the harm, but the harm was considered to be negligible in terms of increase in traffic, and the harm was considered to not be severe by the highway officer. But Adam, I don't know if there's any detailed responses you want to come back on.
I don't think that's answered it on that particular point, the sort of level of intensification and the severity of it. The question that was raised about has anybody ever defined the word severe? It's not a black and white answer, unfortunately, because obviously we have to look at developments on a case-by-case basis So you could argue that a development proposal could be perfectly acceptable in one location, but would be a severe impact in another. And so you have to weigh up the traffic generation of the development site against everything that's already going on in that area. The trip generation against the traffic that's already on the roads, the weight of traffic, the volume of traffic, the speed of traffic, the pedestrian, the cycling infrastructure, the passenger transport infrastructure, the collision data. So can you define severe? You can, but it's on a case by case basis, and that's what we've got to look at all the way down the line. Just answering the other questions, the retaining the access point through to the western boundary as an emergency vehicle access only, and it's not going to become just another access for vehicles into the site. Yes, we can secure that because as part of the section 278106 works, the highway works, that access we have used regularly, things like collapsible bollards that the emergency services can open in a matter of seconds, but they do stop other traffic going through. So there are solutions we can use to maintain it as an emergency vehicle access only. Just on the travel planning and the modal shift again, the question was asked, what happens if the development is not achieving those modal shift figures and targets? That's what the safeguarding sum is for. We take that, and if the developer, through the monitoring, through the surveys, and is suggesting that that modal shift isn't being as successful as we'd like it to be, then the safeguarding sum can be used to implement other measures, to implement other infrastructure or whatever. I can't really explain any more of that because I'm not a travel planning principal officer. Numerous comments about the A39 junction works. As Dawn was saying, the impact there isn't severe. We're quite happy that that is. The question was raised, has the highway authority changed its opinion on things, or is there less traffic on the roads? I normally cover area south, but I do know for in towns like Yeovil and things, we have had traffic surveys presented post-COVID that do suggest, because of the increase through COVID of people working from home and not having to go back into an office, we have traffic surveys that are beginning to suggest that the traffic levels have reduced somewhat. Has the highway authority changed its opinion? The highway authority direction from national government is that under today's policies and practices, we prioritise cycling and pedestrian use over and above vehicular traffic, which is why this particular scheme, the 106 agreement, we have now got a package of cycleway pedestrian improvements in accordance with that national direction. So it's not necessarily that we've changed our opinion, it's the environment in which we work has changed. Thank you.
Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. Back to highways just for a moment. I absolutely agree with nothing saying there. And it seems to me that all bases are all covered. Cycle routes, pedestrians, the junction itself, everything's been signed off, it's okay, and more than anything, it's safe. If we to refuse this today, I think, my honest opinion, it will come back to shoot us in the foot. Because if this went all the way to a judicial review, I do believe, in my opinion, we would lose. Principally because highways have signed it off as being safe, workable, and as I said, they've covered all bases. I do not see any particular reason we can actually turn this down based on that. And on that, Madam Chair, I propose we go with the officer's recommendation and grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Just put, councillor Martin to speak, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm ever more befuddled by this one as we go on. I must say, I'm very privileged to have these four gentlemen sitting to my left. The experience that they bring to the table is enormous. And as a consequence, I tend to listen when they speak. No more so than today. Of course, the experience is great. I continue to be concerned by the apparent subjectivity of the word severe. But I think that that's something that I'm not going to resolve today. If I say it's severe and Kathy said it's okay, which one do we choose? We water down them two and choose halfway between them. But that's an argument for a different day. I am going to break the cardinal sin of planning committees everywhere and recognise the fact that we know, because a gentleman spoke to us today about it, that there is another application on the horizon. We all know this to be the case. And I know that we must always look at applications that are in front of us. This line comes out every time we meet. We must look at the application that's in front of us, not at ones that might turn up at some point in the future. But we know there's one on the horizon. And I think it's incumbent upon us, to use a hackneyed political phrase, to look at the world as it is, not at the world as we would wish it to be. I entirely agree with what you said earlier about going down the route of refusal. I entirely agree about that. I think that to choose a losing side is never a good thing, whether we like it or not. And I entirely agree with your assessment. But I would like to bolster my thoughts on that. Whether it lends any weight onto the argument or not, I don't know that I have any more to say about it, but my disappointment about the apparent subjectivity of some of the comments, not that it's anybody's fault, by the way, because you're as bound by the rules as we are. It's just the way things are. I'm babbling. Thank you, Chair.
Chair.
Yes.
Could I just clarify one thing? And I'm grateful to Councillor Hendry for everything he said. And he made some very good points. The risk, as I see it, is not, just to clarify, it's not one of potential judicial review, because at the end of the day, provided you've listened to everything that's been discussed and you've come with an open mind, etc., you're the decision maker, so you can make a decision that's, you can theoretically, and I'm not encouraging this or inviting it, you can theoretically make a decision that doesn't tally with what officers or highway officers are saying. The risk, I believe, would be more that in the absence of any evidence to the contrary on highways grounds, given the very strong responses we've had from the highways expert, if you were to refuse on highways grounds, there is a risk, and I'm not saying that I'm just saying it is a material thing for you to bear in mind. There is a risk that we could end up at an appeal, and that the applicant could seek costs against the council. And I'm not saying that should necessarily influence your decision, but I think that's more of a risk than potentially a judicial review, which would have to look at whether or not we'd erred in law, as opposed to whether our decision and our reasoning was correct. I hope that makes sense, and it wasn't certainly not a criticism, Councillor Henry. I just want to be clear.
Thank you. I've got, yeah, I'll just take legal.
Sure.
Okay, I've put it down.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo the comments of Zach in regard to the point regarding judicial review versus appeal. But I go a little bit further, if I may, through you, Chair, just to say, in terms of defensible reasons for refusal around highways, what I've heard today. And it is absolutely a matter for members, but you've got your highways officer in the room with detailed submissions in that regard. So I think there'd be some difficulty in terms of defensible reasons for refusal on highways grounds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bradford, then Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you. We're just thinking, in view of the fact that another development impending, regarding this. And it happens at Quantock Road regarding the Sedgemoor development about 5 or 6 years ago. A roundabout. People put their heads together. And I just wonder, there's an awful lot going to happen in that area out there. And maybe a roundabout on the A39, either long investment maybe or further back. Maybe an answer to breaks in the traffic, etc., etc. That wouldn't be such a major issue yet. But like all these schemes, somebody's got to come up with the money. And with so many developers involved, sometimes it's a matter of them all working together and coming up with that. So it doesn't always work. So I'm just alluding back to the Woolstock and Stockport, North Heather, some 15 years ago, when everybody put their heads together because there was a drainage problem down there. Well, they all put their heads together straight away, put a pumping station, problem solved. Because the Woolstock and Stockport was built on a floodplain. Always just the floods with depth 3-4 foot, etc., etc. I want not to, I'm just trying to justify what I'm saying. I know what I'm saying, right? There you go. Okay, so that's what I have a suggestion like that. But it's a matter of people working together, and highways will always be a problem everywhere. Traffic will always be a problem everywhere.
But we have the, as it's always that we have the application that is before us. Okay, so councillor Bolt.
If I just get some clarification, because I know that the development that we gave planning permission to, the requirement was there before they, and it's a similar number of houses. The requirement was there for them to get, I'm not sure if it's 106 or the conditions, but they had to put the road in first, roundabout in first, before they could do the application. And eventually they realised the cost and they just didn't build out, although we approved the whole development at the time. I just would like some advice on that, because we've got highways now saying it's okay, but previously highways are saying it wasn't okay. This is my stumbling block on it.
I think that was described as to the reason why, but I don't know if Adam wishes to come back again.
I'm going to try and bail Adam out with my limited memory at the time, because it's also not the area of the district I covered at the time either. But I do remember all the applications coming to committee. I do remember that one, I think, probably being the last one of the number of ones that came to committee. And it was almost justified on the basis that it was enabling the solutions that all of the others needed in terms of the pressure on that particular junction. That site did get consent. That site didn't build out, so they haven't commenced. That permission has lapsed. So whether we like it or not, that solution is also not available for members or for us at the moment. So for this scheme, what we have to look at is what the current traffic generation impacts are on that junction, what the proposal for this site for 150 would result for on that junction, and what the impact, harms or mitigation of that is on this junction. So bearing in mind all of those considerations, they have been looked at by the Highway Authority, and the solutions that have been put forward in terms of the active travel connections, the reduction in the speed limit, all of those improvements are considered to be sufficient by the Highway Authority. I wouldn't be able to tell you categorically right now, and neither would Adam, unfortunately, in terms of what the difference is between the traffic generation numbers from the time that that application was determined versus this one. But if memory serves, it was pre-COVID when we were consenting the Lavington sites, which aligns with the 5-year expiry date. So we would have just been outside of the COVID period. So the traffic generation figures, I think, would have been 2017, 2019 date rather than post 2020. There has been a change. What that change is and whether it's materially affected the recommendation of the highways officers, I cannot give you a categorical answer, but the assessment of the junction as is today without that roundabout, with the interventions that are being proposed, have been assessed as part of this application. So the recommendation that you've got before you today is a result of those assessments.
Okay, we've had a long old debate about this one, and we've had two proposals. The first one was to defer, and site visit, I think, that hasn't had a seconder. And I'm looking around and it's still not got a seconder.
I'll withdraw, Madam Chairman, yeah.
Thank you. And so we now have a proposal by councillor Hendry to propose the officer's recommendation to approve the application. And would that, can I just ask for advice whether that would include the transfer?
Yeah,
The
the potential,
section, the
yeah.
potential one, section 106 transfer of open spaces.
Yeah, so within the 106 at the moment, within the heads terms that's on page 61 for members, there is public open space, which includes a bullet point on management and maintenance. From the debate of committee and the applicants in the room, we will be taking on what the management and maintenance of that space looks like and whether there is scope to loop in the parish council in connection with that. That will have to be taken offline for a separate agreement because it needs to be agreed through the 106. But there is a requirement to manage and maintain those spaces, and the voice of the parish has been heard through the meeting, and we will endeavour to make those connections outside of this meeting, but it will have to be something that's dealt with through the 106 process.
Thank you. No, we have the proposal, as I say, to agree the officer's recommendation. I am looking for a seconder. Councillor Ham, seconded by Councillor Ham. All those in favour, please show. Five. All against, please show. 1, 2, 3. And abstentions. And 1 abstention. That's everybody, isn't it? So that is passed and carried. Thank you. Thank you for the debate. Thank you for the speakers. I will now take a 5-minute comfort break before going into the second application. Members, we'll go on now to the second application of the afternoon, and this is for change of use to 8-bed house in multiple occupation for 11 Church Street, Bridgewater. Dan, can I ask you to do the presentation, please?
Yeah, I'll throw my water on the floor first. Glad that's being recorded. So yeah, this is a proposed change of use from a 6-bed dwelling to an 8-bed house in multiple occupation. The main consideration is in Bridgewater Centre in Church Street. Thank you so much. And the key considerations, as always, will be the principle of development in this location, impacts on residential amenity, highways and parking, and flood risk. You'll note that visual amenity isn't one of the ones listed where it would normally be, and that's on the basis that no external proposals, no external changes are proposed to the actual building itself. So the application site highlighted here with a red dot, and you can see the car park behind it. Go on to the next slide. Here's the plan of the site. So the building itself does take up most of the curtilage of the property, but there are areas to the rear and to the front, area to the front for parking and an area to the rear for potential amenity space. Here are the proposed floor plans. They're not hugely clear on this, I'm afraid, but it's just showing how it would effectively be over two floors with living room and sort of residence seating area at ground floor, and then the bedrooms at first floor level and ground floor level. Sorry. Got a few photographs. So the application site is to the left where that car is poking out. That's the proposed parking area, and you can see it better here that there are 2 parking spaces available off road to serve the development, and then a shot looking back the other way, so you can see where the property is. So it's not the end terrace, but there's one next to that. In terms of the planning balance, which we need to look at, this first need to say this is a very sustainable location in the town centre, very easy walking distance of services, retail units. You can see there's a big car park behind it, and it's already in residential use, and it's felt that an 8-bed housing multiple occupation remains compatible residential use. As said earlier, there are no external alterations proposed, and it's felt that the change in occupancy will not detrimentally to any material extent affect the character or appearance of the area, and therefore ensures compliance with policy D2 of the local plan. In terms of residential area amenities, the internal layout includes communal spaces and an external garden area and enclosed refuse and cycle storage, thereby providing living conditions that are acceptable for the future occupiers without causing significant harm to neighbour amenity, thereby satisfying policies D2 and D25. In terms of highways and parking, you could argue that parking is not required, given its highly sustainable location, but actually in this instance, there are 2 on-site parking spaces provided, and there would be cycle storage, so that would ensure a small increase in occupancy from 6 persons to 8 persons would not be likely to create harmful parking or highway impacts. And as I said, there's a big public car park behind. And then, although it is in flood zone 3, which is an area of high flood risk, as is a lot of Sedgemoor, unfortunately, the existing residential use of the premises has already been established. Whilst we have to be cognizant of the increase in occupancy, we don't believe that materially alters the flood vulnerability of the property and complies with policy D1. There are fire safety concerns that have been raised by third parties, but this would fall within the HMO licensing regime, and would not constitute material planning grounds for refusal in this instance. Obviously, we do have the objection from Bridgwater Town Council, and I'll just summarise that is the concerns around what they consider to be overdevelopment, lack of parking, access in and out, and changing the character of the neighbourhood. But for the reasons as I've set out, and as more detailed set out in the report, we don't believe that those would be sufficient grounds to refuse, such that we would have a defensible reason for refusal if it should go to appeal, and it would contribute towards housing needs by providing additional accommodation in a sustainable location in the town centre. And then finally, I have one final slide which just really summarises it. So the proposal represents a modest 8-bed large HMO within Bridgwater, which is the most sustainable settlement within Sedgemoor district, with no external alterations, and the use remains compatible. It provides suitable internal and external living conditions for future occupiers. It will safeguard neighbour amenity, and whilst there could be a slight increase in activity, there's no reason to believe that would be unacceptable. And appropriate waste and cycle storage have been provided. Given its highly sustainable location and the available on-site parking, this means that no highway impacts that would be severe would arise. Although it's flood zone 3, the residential use is already established, and there would just be a minimal increase in occupancy. So overall, we believe that the proposals do comply with the local plan policies, and we recommend approval subject to the conditions as set out in the report. But the officer has also helpfully included those as a slide on the screen now. There are just 3 conditions proposed: standard time limit 1, the standard plan numbers 1, and the crucially, that the accommodation shall not be occupied by more than 8 persons, and that they shall not internally subdivide and provide additional bedrooms. And that's partly around potentially reducing potential additional impacts on neighbours, but also about retaining that sort of high quality living environment for the occupiers, which is a planning consideration as well. I think that's all I had to say on that at this stage, but I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. No public speakers for this one. I'd just like to point out there are inaccuracies on the actual report on pages 83 and 84 in terms of the divisional members. It's down as Bridgewater South. In fact, it's Bridgewater North and Central. So the ward members are actually councillors Redmond and Bruce. And Councillor Bruce couldn't be here today. She's given her apologies, but she has submitted some comments which I've asked that could be read out, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So Councillor Bruce's comments are as follows. Reason 1, cumulative impact on residential amenity. The retrospective change of use of the property at 11 Church Street to an 8-bedroom house in multiple occupation by reason of the intensity of occupation and the associated level of activity, noise, disturbance and comings and goings would result in an unacceptable impact on the living conditions of neighbouring residential occupiers. The proposal therefore fails to safeguard residential amenity and is contrary to policies D2 and D14 of the Sedgemoor Local Plan 2011 to 2032 and paragraph 130F of the National Planning Framework Policy Framework. Reason 2, over-intensification and harm to character. The proposed use represents an over-intensive form of residential development, which, by virtue of the scale of occupation and associated domestic activity, would be apologies, that's a word I've never come across before. Incongruous. Yeah, thank you. Incongruous with the established character and function of this part of Church Street, to the detriment of the residential character of the area. The development is therefore contrary to policies D2 and D14 of the Sedgemoor Local Plan and paragraphs 8 and 130C of the National Planning Policy Framework. In addition, highway standing advice simply means no objection on safety grounds. It does not negate parking stress as an amenity issue, disturbance from vehicle movements and cumulative activity impacts. Thank you very much.
And then, sorry. Yeah, back.
Can I first say apologies for the mistakes in drafting? I told myself off and I will be telling the case officer off for getting the wrong ward, so apologies. I hope you'll accept that. Yeah. And the second thing is a further apology. Dawn, having a much superior local knowledge to me, has pointed out that the actual car park next door is as the car park that has a 3-hour maximum parking time. So for me to say it was a public car park, I may have misled the members, and I'd like you to retract that comment. There is a car park, but it's maximum 3 hours. Thank you.
Councillor Smedley.
As a former car park attendant for Sedgemoor District Council, I can confirm there were 200 car parking spaces on that site some years ago. They're not there anymore. There's very little public park in that part of town, and changes made due to recent roadwork, shall we say, in that area have changed the character of the area quite substantially, putting a lot of pressure, particularly on Church Street. Cars that try to go down Eastover now often turn up down Church Street, sometimes coming from the opposite way down Church, which is a one-way street from the far end. I would say it's a difficult street to find parking on, and won't be helped by the lack of adequate parking for this. And I think Councillor Bruce has summed up all the numbers and letters you need for objecting to this, and I say it would change the character of the area. It's certainly overdevelopment, and I would propose that we object to this decision. The proposal.
Okay, note that. Can I just ask a question? Because there was a similar application, wasn't there, in the same street that was refused? Can I ask why that one was refused and this one hasn't?
I will leave Zach to quickly Google any recent applications for HMOs in that street. The point I was going to raise is in the planning history for this application, there is a lawful development certificate that was withdrawn. The applicant was trying to demonstrate that they've been operating it as a HMO for 10 years. They couldn't categorically demonstrate it fully in operation as an 8-bed HMO for that passage of time, which is why the lawful development certificate was withdrawn. You can operate a 6-bed HMO before you need planning permission. So assuming there is some degree of lawful use to the unauthorised 8-bed occupation, what we're looking at is a net increase of 2 bedrooms to the historic established use of the site. So in terms of the direct impacts of this proposal my concern would have been neighbouring properties going from a 6-bed HMO to an 8-bed HMO. The attached adjoining property isn't in residential use, it's a commercial use. It's not used residentially at all. So there's no direct impact in terms of harm or amenity value on the attached pair of the semi-detached, as set out on one of the pages in the report. Apologies, closed it now, but it's in the neighbouring amenities bit in terms of the use of that building. So number 9 as chiropractor and a hypnotherapy practice. So that's a commercial use operated during normal business hours, wouldn't be affected by the use or operation of this building as an 8-bed HMO. Rightly or wrongly, it has been in use as an 8-bed HMO for a period of time. Lawfully, it could have been in use as a 6. So technically what we're looking at is an intensification from 6 to 8 and what degree of impact or harm that has. Bridgewater is a very sustainable location. Yes, it is Asda car park behind it, so that isn't a publicly available car park for any longer than 3 hours, but there is a publicly available car park if you go down that road, across the road, near where the old Aldi that's now shut, behind the McCure. I think that's the nearest public car park. There are also a number of public car parks quite close to this area. And from here, you could easily walk to a number of facilities or within the town centre or even the sort of retail expansion for Bridgewater being fairly local, walking it fairly frequently myself. So in terms of sustainability, it is about as sustainable as you get in terms of HMO. So the question is 2 parking spaces for the increase of 2 bedrooms and the overall use of the site for an 8-bed HMO, is that acceptable? There were concerns about sort of racks and bins and that type of thing. There is also a garage, and the garage would be used for the siting of the bins and the bicycles. So they would be arguably more secure than what they are at the moment, where they're outside the front of the premise. So I just wanted to flag those issues for members' consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer, then Councillor Hendry.
Well, it's a question that's just relating to the flood risk. I just want to understand, we're basically saying because it's already domestic use, there's no change. Query I wanted to ask, the fact that it's an HMO and there'll be ground floor accommodation, is there refuge within the property or available for those in need of getting away from the flood level that normally a designated refuge?
We're just squinting at floor plans, bear with us.
Okay.
Yeah, ask the next question. We'll just get up a bigger plan so we can see it properly. But based on what I can see on that slide, that looks like there's a hallway that goes up. So you've got to the second floor relatively quickly, or the first floor relatively quickly. Then there's a hallway space that you can loiter in if you don't have a room on that floor. But we can confirm when we get the plan up.
Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. I fail to see why 2 extra people would make the slightest bit of difference to something like this. Absolutely, I fail to see that. I just have to go along with this on a positive side, because I cannot believe that 2 people make the slightest bit of difference. Thank you.
Thank you. It's I think the policies aren't helpful to think in Bridgewater in trying to the frustration of the cumulative effect that HMOs have on the town. But and for that reason, proposal has been made to object, which I will second. So can I ask for all those in favour of objection? So, 1, 2, 4. And against? 2, 4, 5. Okay, so that has fallen. Thank you.
Could I just come back on councillor Filmer's
Yes, yeah.
point? So I've got the plans up. I'm sorry, they're just such poor quality on the slides, but I've managed to get the actual application up. So yeah, at ground floor, you've got 3 bedrooms with a living room, kitchen, living area, garage, laundry, and then at first floor level, you've got the other 5 bedrooms, so bedroom 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There isn't a specific sort of shared amenity area, but there is a sort of fairly substantial landing areas at first floor level, which wouldn't be ideal. But as I say, in terms of the fact that you've already got a 6, you could have a 6-bed HMO with accommodation at ground floor and first floor. It's felt that the additional harm or impact is not so great. It's worth pointing out, and it's a material consideration, but we didn't feel it was worth. It would be so substantial as to justify refusal.
If there's no further debate, I'm looking for a recommendation. Yeah.
Right, as per the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking for a seconder for that. Councillor Hendry. All those in favour, please show. And all those against, please show. So that is carried. Thank you, members. That's all of the applications before us today. Just a couple of appeals. Zach, do you want to just take us through those, please?
I will. Of course, Chair, I will do. And I'm going to just try. I have got some. Where are they? Sorry, I have got the drawings for some of these. Well, I thought I had saved on the desktop. Just bear with me a second. Oh dear. I'm not a computer expert, am I? Here we go. So for the first one was this application for a how do I share that?
You were not the person sharing.
Okay. Well, the first application was for a 2-storey rear extension coming out about 3 meters. It's an interesting one, this, because it was full 2-storey height, although it's slightly inset from number 27. The officers were concerned that there would be an oppressive impact from the development in terms of having a 2-storey sort of wall, very high wall, right there up close to their rear garden area and windows on the rear of their property. And the inspector agreed with our assessment. I'm sure there would be a much better way of doing this, and now they've had an appeal dismissed. Hopefully, the applicant will look at alternative schemes that wouldn't have that same impact on the neighbour, perhaps something a bit more neighbourly. I'm sure there's capacity for them to get some additional floor space, maybe just by rearranging it and moving it away from the boundary. So, you know, it was pleasing to see the appeal dismissed, but, you know, we don't want to stop people improving their property, but I think it was the right judgment in this instance. So that was the only real consideration in terms of that one. The second application was for conversion of this sort of bed and breakfast studio unit into a new dwelling. And it's an interesting one. It's a shame I can't show you the drawings because effectively the key considerations here, there were 3. One was highways, but the inspector felt that the existing arrangement for the bed and breakfast and studio was such that it hadn't caused major severe highway implications because there's no turning area there, and felt that the movements from a dwelling wouldn't be significantly dissimilar, materially dissimilar to those from a single dwelling. And so the inspector didn't back us up on that, but the inspector did feel that the accommodation that would be proposed with effectively a bedroom that had no outlook whatsoever, just one roof light serving it, central roof light, was not a good quality of accommodation. It's actually really pleasing to see appeal decisions where inspectors are acknowledging that actually we should be looking for a higher quality for residents. I mean, I remember 20, 30 years ago, that wasn't even something I'd even consider really in a planning application. We always used to think, well, you know, caveat emptor and buyer beware, and you know that if they want to do it. But actually things have changed, and I think things have particularly changed because more pressure on housing, and developers are trying to maximise profits, particularly in urban areas, and providing really poor quality living environments. And now we have nationally prescribed space standards. This would meet, ironically, this would meet the prescribed space standards, but would have virtually no outlook. Even the outlook from the lounge, dining, kitchen would be poor. It would be poorly lit, and yeah, so it's useful that, you know, for a bed and breakfast, fine, you're staying there 1 or 2 nights, but for a permanent accommodation, you know, the inspector backed us up on that. And the inspector also felt that because it's allied to the applicant's property, it would be separated because it would be a new dwelling. At the moment, it's a studio bed and breakfast, so they expect some sort of lack of privacy in terms of movements. And if you're running a bed and breakfast from your own property, from an outbuilding, you're going to expect that. But when it's a new dwelling, there would be sort of a loss of privacy to the host dwelling, even though they're the applicant. It's interesting, the inspector and the officers look at it as applicant blind, because obviously the permission goes with the land, not with the person who puts in the application. And the inspector agreed with us that in the absence of any sort of separation, any hedging or fencing or anything, the applicant argued, well, you know, oh, we'll put up all this stuff. But the applicant didn't actually provide any information to show how they would separate it. That's probably a lesson to them, but I still think in terms of the works they're proposing, the conversion works, again, I'm pleased with the decision. So that's 2 out of 2. We have had another appeal decision, but too late for this one, and I'll cover it, or if I'm surveying, I'll cover it at the next meeting, which was a gypsy and traveller site within a flood zone. And that's, I'm sure Councillor Phil will be interested in that one. We have in the past lost a number of these ones, I understand, well before my time, where obviously because we don't have a supply of a full supply of gypsy and traveller sites in accordance with the GTAA. But the bottom line here is that mobile homes and caravans are classed as really vulnerable. Sorry, most vulnerable, sorry. And they're so actually more vulnerable than a bricks and mortar. And so we've taken a view that, you know, whilst we had those appeal decisions previously, climate change is creating more and more issues. Flood risk is becoming more and more prevalent. We've got the NPPF is being strengthened around this. And so we had a good old healthy debate between officers before that recommendation was made, because we are cognizant that obviously we are displacing people who may not have another place to go to. But you know, we're looking at the guidance, national guidance, having spoken with the Environment Agency, we felt that it was the right thing. There wasn't even a safe means of escape, you know, or a safe haven to go to. So that was refused, and the inspector agreed with our decision. I mean, obviously we'll present more detail next time, but I thought that was a slight shift. I mean, I don't know if Dawn had any comments on that, but it's a slight shift from perhaps where we were a few years ago historically. Perhaps Councillor Phil may probably know, he's been on the committee for a long time.
Thank you, Chair. We actually went to appeal on the forum. EA didn't back us at the appeals, which was one of the reasons why we lost them. So it's interesting that they've come out and taken that view this month.
Thank you for all the updates. I don't think there are any further questions. Oh, yes, sorry.
Another question is the point I raised with you when you suggested I raised it at committee about the format of the minutes. It was just a query I wanted to raise because we had the minutes come through at the last meeting. And when you go through them, there are huge number of bullet points of issues that were raised by public speakers, by parish councils, by other councillors who were addressing the committee, going into great detail about what they said and what they put before us. And then when it gets to the section about talking about what members of the committee actually said, it says after deliberations, and then who proposed what we decided. And it just seemed a very strange balance between we report absolutely everything that someone who's not a member of the committee says, and then when it comes to the committee, we completely ignore that. I could understand it doing it on both sides of saying you report everything for everybody says, or you report just the decisions we make, because normally that's what the minutes are about. It's about recording decisions. And I didn't understand why we'd gone to so much depth of, I mean, it's pages of, when you looked at the minutes, it was all about what people addressed committee and nothing about what we made as decisions.
I think the bullet point is split in two sections. Tell me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah,
the bottom,
on there.
yeah, the bottom set of bullets look like they are summarising what the councillors were raising.
So different bullet points. So we've on the prior set, I'm guessing that's when you're looking at. So for example, on that one on item 57, application 3225 0004, got councillors were addressed by one supporter. And then it goes on to councillors were addressed by Councillor Bill Revins. And then below that it says councillors were invited to discuss the application. The following points were raised. That's what's shown online at the moment. I just wonder if the printed ones you have is different to that at all.
Okay. Yeah, that's on one of them, not on the other anyway.
Okay, yeah.
The bullets that
So we aren't having, okay.
the bullets at the bottom of page 13
Yes.
effectively are the bullets from the discussion that happened at committee. And then similarly, the bullets halfway down page 15 of the next item, again, are bullets from members.
Okay.
But it is a slightly different format to what we've had historically.
Is this a format that goes across the county?
I wouldn't be able to answer that, but it's a format I was taught when I took over this
Right.
meeting, but I can discuss it further within the teams to see if there is a discrepancy between any of the area plans, because we are trying to unify how they look. So if there's a discrepancy there, we'll pick up on our end.
All right, thank you, Lee, thank you.
I just want to say, having seen minutes from other committees, there was a lot of discussion about the format of minutes for committees, because some committees have experienced very, very succinct minutes, and then had criticism from either members that were in attendance or members of the public that actually it didn't cover anything enough. Then they've gone to the extreme of having really, really detailed minutes about everything that was mentioned, which is then overkill, because the minutes are supposed to be representative of the main or key points of discussion, not a replacement of the committee meeting verbatim. So there is a lot of discussion going on at the moment, and I know there was discussion about use of Copilot and how we can use that to support us as well. So again, it was a plea from the East Committee in terms of, can we amongst committees decide what the format is and get a standardised format across Somerset? So the plea did go up through East Committee, but if it can go up through North as well, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, I'll now declare the meeting closed and thank